which is interesting because I believe that Iggy Pop was in a jazz outfit before he started the Stooges. And I know he talked about in the documentary about how he was a drummer and he basically got tired of looking at everybody's ass.
Hey, and welcome to Thursday Collection Connection, where we're playing that game. It's just an excuse to talk about records. It's a game I play with my brother, Plastic Eric from the Plastic Soundwave Cult, and you can follow along and play along by subscribing to both channels. You don't really need to know the rules to play along. It's pretty easy. It's just talking about a record that in some capacity relates to the last record that was shown. To that end, in Eric's last video, he talked about the Stooges, Funhouse. I'm already forgetting if it was Iggy and the Stooges by that time, or I think it's still just the Stooges. I would like to point out that I believe Iggy worked at School Kids Records, maybe. It's already been 20 plus years since I lived in Ann Arbor, but I used to shop at the place that he infamously worked once upon a time. Tiny personal connection, or sort of Kevin Bacon-ish 1 degree connection to Iggy Pop. But in any case, like the T-Rex that we talked about a little while back, Funhouse isn't quite as wild as it was probably in its moment. The T-Rex, the glam of T-Rex, more sultry to me than sort of what I think of as glam, sort of outrageous and, promiscuous and stuff like that, provocative. The Stooges had, with album names like Raw Power, had this reputation of being sort of wild and unhinged. And that was bolstered in another callback to an old episode, the Rubaiyat compilation, which was an Elektra 40th anniversary celebration where their current roster was covering old songs on the label, gave me the false impression so not only have I presented that album in its own right, but it came up when we talked about Television, Marquee Moon, and how the Kronos Quartet cover of the title song gave me the wrong impression about what Television was. And after queuing up Funhouse, I would say by the same token, there's a John Zorn cover, which is completely unhinged, which is about the screamingest cover you've ever heard. It barely felt like a song, like you couldn't figure out how they covered a song with just the racket that they were making, how that was a version of a song. Gave me the impression that the Stooges were, just off their rockers with noise and almost no songs to be had. And it was a cover of the song TVI, which is on this record, which surprisingly, then when I heard it, it is just kind of a riff that repeats over and over and has lyrics. The John Zorn cover, I don't think that they enunciated a single word. It was just screaming, and every so often they would scream in the rhythm of what the lyrics would be. To its credit, I guess by the song 1970, that felt a little more unhinged to me, but just kind of screaming a phrase over and over. But in any case, I feel like it's probably less unhinged in hindsight than it was for its time. In trying for a completely new kind of connection, something that we haven't done before, as I was looking up some info on the album on Wikipedia, I saw that the length of the album was 36 minutes and 35 seconds. So, not super short, but not long either. And I thought, what if I could find an album that was the same length according to Wikipedia. And I went through scores of my albums, trying to find an exact match. And eventually I hit upon Sleater-Kinney's Dig Me Out. This was their, 1997 album? This is a 2014 reissue of it on CD. Kind of a reissue campaign that came about before their long hiatus ended and they put out a new record. And so you can see that according to Wikipedia, Dig Me Out is 36 minutes and 34 seconds. But what you may not know is that Wikipedia can eat my farts, because according to iTunes, my iTunes, it is 36 minutes and 35 seconds. So that is my connection, an album that is 36 minutes and 35 seconds long. I know those things can vary by seconds here and there, depending on the version, depending on this and that. There's always a seconds difference, but I found two. That's at 36 minutes and 35 seconds. Sleater-Kinney was introduced into the household by my wife, interestingly, who had read Carrie Brownstein's memoir, what's it called? Hunger Makes Me a Modern Girl, I think is the name of the book. So she had read that in 2015 and decided that she would like to get familiar with Sleater-Kinney's music. In my head, Sleater-Kinney I had lumped in with like L7 and Hole and bands from the 90s that were sort of girl power and grunge offshoots, that the music that I had heard didn't necessarily do anything for me. So I never pursued them. They weren't played on the radios the stations that I listened to. And so I just kind of let that go. But as a result of my wife reading the book, because she admired Carrie Brownstein as a comedian, from her role in Portlandia with Fred Armisen. That's what brought her to the book, but then she wanted to listen to some of the music. And so we bought Dig Me Out because she liked the song Little Babies, and the then new album, which was No Cities to Love. Ended up being a connection that whatever it was that I could find that fit this specific length of record would end up being what I chose. And so it ended up being an album that I don't necessarily have a lot to say about because I'm not too familiar with it. But listening to it in the last couple of days, it's probably better. It's, in a lot of ways to me, more raw than the Stooges. In addition to Carrie Brownstein, the vocalist Corin Tucker has a voice that, to me, it's like an angry warble. It's like if Stevie Nicks was angrier and shouted more when she sang. And that grew a little thin on me for the length of an album, I have to admit. But it was a trio: Janet Weiss, the drummer, who has since left the band. They are the members of the band. And outside of the vocals, that did grate on me a little bit, I could see it being the sort of thing that could grow on you, that you'd have to listen to a few times. If I, anyway, could get past those vocals, to really enjoy the riffs, and the music, which was, again, very loose. Made me think at times of like Pixies. They're described more as punkish than grunge. I'm feeling this has just gone on a very long time. I had a bunch of things in my head that I was trying to put together. I think, so I liked Little Babies is pretty good. I definitely liked Turn It On, I think, is one that stood out to me when I was listening to it. And I think One More Hour and Little Babies were the singles from this record. I could see it growing on me if I could get past the vocals. And listening to a couple other things, I think maybe the vocals weren't quite so harsh and laid on top and shouty, sort of that warbling caterwaul. on maybe subsequent records. You know, they've grown up quite a bit after they stopped in, I think it was about 2005, for a good 10 years, and yeah, reformed. And they put out a couple albums since reforming without Janet Weiss. And yeah, all that said, it's probably going to end up being one of my longer videos because I was trying really hard to remember a lot of info. So I will throw over to Eric, the 36 minute and 35 seconds according to my iTunes, and 36 minutes and 34 seconds according to Wikipedia, album from 1997, Slater-Kinney, Dig Me Out. Oh, and they're named for a road in Lacey, Washington, which I kind of knew. I thought it was an intersection, but it was something that I knew, tried to confirm. Semi-knew apparently that there was maybe a rehearsal space that they used to use on that road. But that's where the band name comes from. So there's that, which threw me off. Before I knew much about them, I assumed that it was like Bachman-Turner Overdrive. But no, nobody in the band's named Slater or Kinney. Last names, it is Tucker, Brownstein, Weiss, and yeah, so rock on. I'll throw that over to Eric. It's going to be 20 minutes long, and you can look for his response on Monday on the Plastic Soundwave Cult. For me, that's all I have. So until next time, I thank you for watching. Bye-bye.